station where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
So, the gentleman we're going to now introduce to you is a gentleman that I have seen speak on more than one occasion, and I immediately thought the first time that I saw him speak, this is really special, because mediumship, the whole psychic world and all of that, it often doesn't cross into the scientific realms, but it should. And Chris is one of the pioneers in a way of really putting it to the test, and I've been astonished by what I've seen before. So we're going to hear a little bit about the background to this kind of research today, and hopefully do a few little experiments along the way. So please give a big hand for Chris Connolly. Thank you very much.
Microphones, I'll tell you. Anyway, good evening everyone. It's lovely to be here with you. So tonight I would like to have a chat to you about mediumship. And it's something that I'm I've been fascinated about for the past 25 years. Primarily because I found myself getting involved quite accidentally. I'm one of these people, like most of us, who never dreamed that their life would go down a path of sitting in darkened rooms and saying to people, is anybody there? And holding hands with people that you don't really know. But I found myself doing that quite often, and ended up being involved in the spiritualist movement for many years, and for over 25 years now. And what I ended up doing was thinking to myself, I've experienced an awful lot of having a lot of personal experiences with what we say referred to as the spirit world, if you like. And I decided that I needed to explore this phenomenon, this world, if you like, by throwing myself into it. Because my background is very much from the engineering, from the science background. I've been involved in the space industry for over 12 years. Before that, the aerospace industry, where I've been designing imaging technologies for satellites to take photograph of the Earth. And we can have debates whether you think the Earth is round or flat. That comes at a later date. But to take photographs of the Earth. But also, I thought it would be cool a few years ago to go away and do some training in psychology. So a lot of the research that I've done is based on my own doctorate in psychology, which I'll be presenting a little bit as well, because that's been quite interesting. But how many of us here have had an experience, shall we say, with what we call ghosts or the spirit world in some form? Yeah. Oh, good. You're all converted. Okay, it's going to be an easy evening. Easy evening. Okay. All right. And how many of us have had, shall we say, private sittings with mediums or psychics or that sort of thing? Okay. And I'm sure many of us probably, have had different experiences, some good and some not so good. And one of the things I like to talk about, as we're going to go through today, is this evening, is what some of the research says, what some of the scientific research says, because there seems to be this idea that if you believe in the paranormal, or if you're a medium or a spiritualist, then there's something not quite right. And that's generally the consensus that the scientific community have. And I often look to the mirror every morning and look at myself and say to myself, do I have a few marbles missing, or am I okay? And this is I'm sure there are many people who, many spiritualists who often, and mediums often look in the mirror and say the same thing, primarily because it's not the scientific literature, it's very much the media likes to portray spiritualism, mediumship, and so forth in a certain light. But I'm sure I don't have to mention too much about the fact that we don't really pay much attention to the media, especially probably not in this room. a lot of the public do pay attention to the media. And so what we're going to go through today is some of the scientific literature, because I think it's important for us to really understand that, yes, you have spiritualism and mediumship, so to speak, and you can go through private city and have your own personal experience. But these experiences are real. These experiences have some sort of scientific validation, some type of scientific evidence base. So the first place I would like to start on this journey with you, and incidentally, it will be a sort of kind of interactive in some respects as well, because at some point I'll be asking a number of you to come up, and I've got some equipment just to measure the sort of brain activity. A lot of people get a bit worried because they're worried about whether they've got a brain, but I've done this now for about 10 years, and I'm pleased to say I've always found a brain. So you've got no worries there, okay? And so I've got a bit of technology that I use out of the field when I work with mediums to see what sort of activities going on in the brain. And it might be kind of cool to have a bit of fun tonight with that as well, okay? But let's have a look first of all and see whether mediums and those that believe in the paranormal specifically are actually barking mad. So we're going to actually look initially about what the literature says about the mental health. Now, how many of us believe in the paranormal? How many of us have experienced the paranormal? And from the number of people who have put your hand up having a private sitting, it suggests you're all barking mad. But actually, we find that if you look at the literature, it's not quite that way. For example, there's a wonderful paper written from researchers in Brazil looking at the cognitive functions of trance mediums who are able to go into a deep altered state and allegedly have discarnate entities speak through them. And they explored using various methods to look and see what their cognitive ability was. Now, the reason they do that is because one of the perspectives that the scientific field has is that we have some type of cognitive deficit, meaning we're stupid. That's a posh way of saying we're stupid. That we have some sort of cognitive deficit in the sense we're not able to think critically and so forth. And actually, this research that the Brazilians did actually showed that actually these.
Sorry, Chris, I need to push the lead together a bit.
That helps, doesn't it? Hold the bottom bit like that. Okay. So the researchers looked at these trance mediums and actually found that actually, when compared with other non-trance mediums, that they had wonderful cognitive ability. In fact, cognitive ability no different from the mainstream population. Interestingly, we found another study conducted by a colleague of mine, Professor Chris Rowe. He's a team of individuals a team of researchers at Northampton University, and they looked at whether the experience of experience of mediums, in particular spiritualist mediums, about 80 of them, and measured their sort of like mental well-being in terms of their psychological well-being, their psychological health. And they found actually that their measures suggested that mediumship was not associated with any form of mental dysfunction, any mental illness, or anything of that sort of like. In fact, what they actually showed was that mediums and spiritualists, and those who generally believe in the paranormal, seem to enjoy a better level of mental health than those who don't. So if you have a friend or colleague who thinks you're mad because of things you believe, the probability is that they're the mad one and you're okay. Something to bear in mind. Interestingly, when you look at the literature on mediums and spiritualists and the like, you find that when they talk about the cognitive deficits in mediums and so forth, it seems to match very much the literature in the talk about people that believe in conspiracy beliefs. The literature on conspiracy beliefs seems to suggest also that those who believe in conspiracy beliefs have some type of cognitive deficit as well. Well, my wife did her degree last year, and she was stuck for a sort of like a studies to do at the end. So with a gentle nudge and a persuasion from myself, I said to her, why don't you have a look and see what the sort of cognitive abilities of mediums are comparing with conspiracy beliefs, people that believe in conspiracies. And what we found was to use these different studies, these different measures, looking at thinking styles, whether the individual was open-minded to different experiences, whether they were closed-minded to experiences, whether the person, and a whole range of other sort of thinking style beliefs. And what they found was that people that believed in the paranormal, spiritualists, mediums, and such alike, had absolutely no difference in conspiracy belief scores or thinking styles between spiritualists and individuals of no religious belief, showing that, again, you can't always trust what the literature says. Now, an interesting sideline to this was, when I looked at some of the questionnaires, some of the measures that were being used out in the literature base, a lot of them use a scale called the generic conspiracy belief scale. And this is a scale that was developed in 2014. It was published in a paper saying basically this is the scales of these four scales of conspiracy beliefs. So if you want to do a study on conspiracy beliefs, you follow our scale, you use our scale, and it consists of 15 questions. And at those 15 questions, you're meant to just score between 1 and 6. 1 being you don't believe the statement, and 6 being saying you do believe quite strongly the statement. The idea being that higher the score at the end, the more likely you have ideation towards conspiracy beliefs. However, when I looked at the questions and I reflected over the events over the past 3.5 years, I considered myself thinking, I think any sane normal person is now going to be classed as a conspiracy theorist. And I'll show you what I mean. Might be a bit, I'm not going to read this, so I'll point a few out to you here. Let's have a read of this, okay? Number 1, the government is involved in the murder of innocent citizens or well-known public figures and keeps this a secret. No, surely not. No, surely not. Okay, this one. And number 2, the power held by heads of state is second to that of unknown groups who really control world politics. What? Like the World Health Organization, the UN, and the World Economic Forum? Surely not. I mean, I'm not an expert on extraterrestrials, but I am aware in the US there's been a lot of discussion in the Senate and so forth on extraterrestrial and UAPs and stuff. Number 4, the spread of virus and disease have resulted in deliberate concealed effort by some organisations. You know, number 5, a group of scientists manipulate, fabricate or suppress evidence in order to deceive the public. Surely not. I've never heard such nonsense. And this is the sort of thing that and this is the type of thing that you're seeing in a very standard generic conspiracy belief scale. You know, it's incredible. Other things there, such as, you know, a lot of important information deliberately concealed from the public out of self-interest. You know, this is a standard conspiracy scale questionnaire that's used, and it's almost like they're sort of like normalising this stuff, you know, So, but as I said, this was, I'm sure they didn't foresee the events of the last few years coming up when they did this questionnaire, but it just shows you, I think, back in 2014, and interestingly, there's a guy up there that some people might recognise, Christopher French from Goldsmith University, one of a pioneer of the Skeptic Society, who sort of co-authored this scale. But I would suggest that going forward, any individual who's seriously considering researching conspiracy beliefs should really sort of like reflect very hard about using such a scale such as this. Because I think, as you all agree, the last 3 years have shown that things that we thought were conspiracies end up being reality. But anyway, as a sideline here, and the point being, I suppose, is that when we present literature, when science and the community presents literature to us, we always have to be mindful of the measures and the scales and the questions they ask. But back now to mediumship again. So this is some work that I did with mediums, because I'm very interested in understanding the psychology behind mediumship, in particular understanding how mediums use cognitive processes to, if you like, maintain that communication with the discarnate entities, the discarnate spirits. And in this research here that I did, I was able to map or understand some of the cognitive processes that mediums use to communicate with the spirit world. And what we decided was it would be interesting to see whether we could actually find some measures or tasks that the mediums could use so we could measure the performance of these cognitive processes. And so, for example, we found measures to measure their working memory, their ability of selective attention and inhibition, multitasking and reaction time. A lot of these tasks, if you all come across these sort of like brain training apps you get, that's supposed to help you sort of like improve your memory and all these sort of guessing games and stuff, well, that's the sort of thing that maybe ask them to do, but in a more sort of academic way, if you like. And we asked them to do this, and we had a database for results from non-mediums, if you like, to compare against. When we looked at the data, we found again that there was no difference between the performance of mediums and that of non-mediums. Now, as a researcher, that's kind of disappointing in some respects. I'd like to find something different, so I've got something to look at. But on the flip side, it does actually also suggest that the cognitive processes, the thinking abilities of mediums is no different to that of anybody else. So again, when it comes to the literature or the general idea that's in society that mediums are somewhat gullible, stupid individuals, believing that they can commune with the spirit world, then actually the evidence in literature is to the contrary. But nevertheless, there is still a lot of evidence, a lot of push by the social media and media generally, the fact that what mediums do is just fake and fraud. This is an example of something that is I found published online. And interestingly, it was from a journal called the Office of Science and Society, separating sense from nonsense, which I thought was quite ironic, really. But this is a journalist who decided to write a little piece on a Netflix show starring a particular medium. And in his piece here, it says here, as a skeptic, I feel it's important to first confront the central claim made by this show that the medium then can get impressions from the dead. There's no good evidence that the dead can talk to us. What can play the role of mediumship, however, are two techniques called cold reading and hot reading. And while the former can appear banal when described, it can be very convincing in the right hands, especially if the sitter who the medium reads is vulnerable and misremembers the details of the session. Now, there are a number of points in this that seem to be very suggestive. It's quite clear that this journalist isn't really a skeptic, but sort of a gentleman that likes to think that he follows the science, shall we say, for a better word. But actually, I think we can actually break this down a little bit. First of all, he makes the assertion that there is no good evidence that the dead can talk to us. Well, from a spiritualist perspective, we would probably agree, because we would say that you're not dead in the start of it, that life is eternal. But that's probably just being a little bit pedantic. But what we'll do, go through in a minute, and we'll show some of the literature that seems to suggest that actually there's some very good evidence to suggest the spirit world or the deceased, shall we say, can actually communicate with us. Also, we'll look at these two techniques called cold reading and hot reading. Are we familiar with those terms? No. Right, okay. So, this is what happens. Cold reading techniques are readings are based on the belief that what the medium does is just give you general statements. Okay? And it's like balming statements and things like that. So, sort of things that everyone would agree with at some point, in the sense that, if I said to you, a medium might say, I've got your father, a typical one, there might be a lady sitting in the front row that's 85. The medium might come to and say, is it your father in the spirit world? Well, there's a good chance the father's going to be in the spirit world if the woman sitting in the front is 85. And so, make these sort of generalised statements based on the physical appearance and the body language and general guesses, essentially. That's what they say cold readings are, and that's what some of the skeptics imply that the mediums use. Basically, sort of like body language and impressions you get, just giving sort of like generalised statements. Hot readings are quite interesting, because hot readings, skeptics say, are based on the fact, or the idea behind hot readings are that the medium somehow knows who's going to be at the church or the congregation that evening. So if a medium was here tonight to demonstrate for you, they would already know who was going to turn up. And they would have gone to Google, found out all about your life, found out where you live, who in the spirit world you've got, who have passed, and so forth. And basically, hot reading is the idea that medium research beforehand the individuals and then they regurgitate and pretend that they're communicating with the spirit world based on the research they conducted. Now, if there's anyone here that's been to a spiritualist church or a spiritualist, or been to a centre and had seen a medium demonstrate, you pretty much get the idea that there's pretty little chance that that medium knows that you're going to be turning up that evening. But nevertheless, that's what they say, the skeptics say, the mechanisms by which a medium is actually connecting to the spirit world is fraudulent. They're using cold readings and hot readings. The thing that I find quite disturbing in this statement, however, is the fact, the assertion that the medium reads is vulnerable. It sort of like suggests this idea that mediums sort of like prey on the vulnerable in some way, the bereaved and the vulnerable and so forth, which again, is I think is a very big sort of stereotype that is there. So let's have a look at what the Science of Mediumship says about this. So, as I mentioned, these are the cold reading techniques and hot reading techniques, the Barnum effect and so forth. As I said, this is based on the fact that you're able to make generalised statements, and from those generalised statements, people have a tendency of agreeing. The Forer effect, out of interest, those who don't know, the Forer effect is a phenomenon in psychology whereby individuals remember the hits more than they remember the misses. Okay, so you're more likely to remember what the medium said that was right than what the medium said that was wrong. Now that's a genuine sort of phenomenon, and that's something we should always be mindful of. But the evidence itself, they're proposing from cold readings is just it doesn't stack up to what the evidence seems to suggest. So, as an example, there's an organisation in Arizona in the US called the Windbridge Research Centre, and they've done all sorts of research with mediums and published their research, and have done for the last, I think it must be at least 15 years now. The director of the research was a lady called Judy Bashel. She was a microbiologist from Australia, that's where she got a doctorate in. And she came across the medium, life took her that way, to have a sitting with the medium, and she was fascinated by how it worked. And so she set up an institute, an organisation to research mediums using sort of like scientific methods that she would use in her everyday job as a microbiologist, so using these type of standards. And so much of her work has been based on using things like blinded conditions. Now, blinded conditions basically means that the medium doesn't know who they're doing the sitting for, and the person having the sitting doesn't know the medium. And in fact, not only do they not know them, they don't ever actually meet each other. Okay? And in this particular case, a typical example of this would be that a medium would do a sitting for 5 individuals, and you might have 5 mediums do 5 sittings for each individual, so there's actually 25 in total. And what happens is there's someone that's transcribing the readings, the sitting, the evidence that the medium gives, and every single sitter will get a copy of their sitting, but a copy of everybody else's sitting as well, what we call decoy sittings. And what they have to do is correctly guess or correctly read through them all and pick out of the 25 the 5 that are theirs. Yeah? That's the idea. And we find time and time again that statistically sitters, the recipients and sitters actually do pick the correct sittings. In fact, and of course this is all blinded, so again, the medium has not met the recipient, the sitting, they're in different rooms and what have you. And the conclusion of this paper, for example, was because the experimental conditions of this study eliminated normal sensory sources of information, in other words, cold readings, a non-local source, however controversial, remains the most likely explanation for the accuracy and the specificity of their statements. So basically it's indicating here that the mediums were able to get evidence from some local source. Basically, this is the scientific jargon, because saying the dead, getting from the dead, is a bit too much for some researchers to say. But it's getting from some place, they're able to get all this information about deceased people that people understand, and we don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. Another study. Now this is a meta-analysis, and a meta-analysis is where generally researchers, instead of conducting their own research, what they'll do is they'll explore the database of research and look over a past maybe 20 years and saying, look, and collect all the evidence together, and then say, on a balance, what does the evidence suggest? Like masks work. And so, in this particular case, we have this example here, and it said the results of the meta-analysis support the hypothesis that some mediums can retrieve information about deceased persons through unknown means. Now, this study looked at research that was conducted between 2000 and 2019, and they looked at all the research conducted, and they said basically, on balance, mediums are doing something. They're able to get this information from somewhere. Notice, of course, it's through unknown means, so they're still not claiming to know where the source of that information is from. However, then came along this chap, quite interestingly, from Rome. It's a devout, I understand it's a devout Catholic, in my understanding. And he did a sort of study as well. It was a quantitative study with triple blind protocol. So there, not only did the medium not meet the sitter not meet the medium, but the researchers never met the mediums or the sitters either. So it was completely sort of blinded in that respect. And the reason we like to do the blinded stuff is quite strangely that the scientific community are more open to telepathy than mediumship, quite ironically. Now they're almost like, the evidence for mediumship is so starting to be overwhelming that a stars will say, look, I'll tell you what, we'll accept telepathy if you leave us alone and not let us have to accept mediumship, But, they do these triple blind protocols, so there's no way that there could be any telepathic link between the medium and the sitter, or the recipient and the sitter, or the researchers, and so forth. So they did this study here, and here, his conclusion was, this study provides further evidence that some mediums are able to obtain accurate information about deceased people, knowing only the deceased name and with no interaction with sitters. It also supports the hypothesis. In some cases, the source of the information are the deceased themselves. So here we have a paper that's actually saying where mediums are connecting to, or able to get information from the deceased, and it is the deceased they're getting that information from. Now, I contacted Patricio Soldi because I know him. I've interviewed him for one of my videos on YouTube. Shameless plug there. And I said to him, because a lot of these researchers work in very credible universities, and publishing papers like this doesn't do a lot for your career, okay? When you start publishing this type of stuff. But I asked him, how are you able, it's quite brave, a lot of researchers just say, from unknown sources or non-local sources or what have you, why did you feel comfortable to actually write the information comes from the deceased themselves? And he said, simple. When you look at all the possible alternative sources of information, the most likely one is the deceased. In other words, it's the most obvious one to go to, because to get it from any other source would be too complicated and too convoluted. So the only option is the deceased themselves, those in the spirit world are able to give that information to you. And this was published in 2021. And again, it's been peer-reviewed, so it's been out there. It's not the self-publication thing, peer-reviewed and out there. And anyone can search for it and find it. And we're getting more and more papers and literature out there that support the idea, support the hypothesis that you are able to survive death. Now, an interesting thing is that when you look at the research generally, and here we're talking not just in mediumship, but in the field of research that we call survival of consciousness, because there's this big field of research looking at consciousness essentially, basically asking the question of what is consciousness? Is it a byproduct of the brain, or is it something out there that the brain filters it? There's all sorts of models for consciousness and what it is. And of course, if consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, it lends itself to the idea that we continue after death, because our consciousness continues. Now, a lot of researchers will admit that mediumship on its own doesn't necessarily provide the conclusive evidence to suggest survival of physical death. But as one researcher once said before, and this is a guy from, again, from Arizona, I believe, Gary Schwartz. He wrote a book called The Afterlife Experiment several years ago, I think about 2006, 2008. But he's a doctor of medicine, psychology, psychiatry, and everything else. But he pointed out that mediumship on its own probably doesn't provide conclusive evidence. But he says, if we compare that and join that with all the other fields of research, such as near-death experiences, such as reincarnation experiences, such as experiences such as deathbed visitations, where those that are maybe in hospices or those that are near death, will see loved ones and talk to them, have these near-death experiences, sort of like near-death experiences. When you have examples such as what's called after-death communications, there's a phenomenon called telephone conversations with the dead. Have you come across that? Yeah? Where you get a telephone call and you're speaking to a loved one, but has passed over. And it's only maybe the following day you'll get a call from somebody that says, are you aware that this person died the previous day or a couple of days before or what have you? And then there you are having a conversation with the person. And as we put everything all together, is when you put all the data all together, then the evidence seems to be quite compelling that there is survival after death. But as I said, tonight I'm just talking about mediumship as a whole. But of course, those skeptics will also say, well, okay, well, look, maybe they're quite good. Maybe these mediums are able to get a few bits and pieces of information. But surely it's all just their imagination. Surely that's all it is. Well, actually, interestingly, they did that research as well. And in this study here, they actually wired up a number of mediums, I think it's 5 mediums, to EEG equipment to measure the activity of the brain, and asked the medium to do different tasks. One of which was to imagine a fictitious story. I think it was a number of tasks. One was to imagine a fictitious story, one was to recall a memory, and the other was to do a mediumistic communication. And when they looked at the EEG activity and compared everything together, they basically found that actually mediumship was nothing like imagination, nothing like recall of memory, and was actually a distinct mental state on its own, suggesting that when a medium is working, they're not using their imagination to construct some type of narrative to convince you of something. But an area I'm particularly fascinated about is the neurophysiology of mediumship. As I said, my own doctorate is looking at this, and I've done some research with this as well. And there's kind of tentative literature out there suggesting that experiences such as ESP, psychic potentials, and mediumship seems to be related to the right hemisphere as with respect to the left, so to speak. So there seems to be a right brain recursion. You'll be here, we'll be saying it's like a right brain sort of activity. The trouble is, a lot of the EEG equipment and research requires very expensive and can be quite laborious in setting up. So I have a tendency of using something I got from Amazon. It does them just as well. And interestingly, this little gizmo here, has had papers published on it. So it doesn't quite cover the whole brain, but it does provide us with a good insight or a good feel for what may be going on with certain mediums and so forth. An area that I'm particularly interested in is to do with trance mediums. Oh, and sorry, yeah, I should point out, you can use that piece of equipment. You get apps you can run on your iPhone, your Android phone, or what have you. And it just makes life easier when you're out in the field. Rather than getting mediums to come to the university lab or whatever, you can actually go to them. And I find that works better for me because there's a sense of it from what we call an ecological validity. What we mean by that is that the medium works in the environment that they're used to working in, yeah, rather than trying to bring them out into a lab and it's like an unknown environment. But you can use sort of, there's apps you can use to download and see the sort of activity going on in the brain. So an area I'm particularly interested in was trance mediumship. Particularly a trance medium wearing an example of one of the headbands there. And I'm just going to show you a couple of images from two mediums in particular. And I've done this about 15 mediums in total, and they're all pretty much broadly the same. But these mediums differ from their different sex, different ages, they come from different parts of the country, there's no similarity between them. But what we find, okay, and what I did was I just measured brain activity in mediums at rest. Okay, so let me just explain what you're seeing here. Okay, so this is looking down, top down, looking on top of the head, okay? So you've got the front of the head here, this is the left side, this is the right side. So that's the front of the head, so you've got the left ear here, right ear on this side. And the colours relate to the amount of activity. So the idea being more activity, that seems to suggest that that part of the brain is active at that time. Okay? So red indicates a lot of activity, and then you've got this colour bar here that gives you an idea. Blue means very little activity. So in this person here, what we've got is a lot of activity on the sides, not much, probably just a bit of average activity at the frontal part. And of course, the idea is if you know what those parts of the brain are doing, or what functions are related to, you get some idea of what's going on. So the frontal part of the brain, for example, deals with your cognitive processes, to do with your thinking, your attention, and things like that. The sides are normally related to things like your memory and emotions and that sort of thing. So looking at this one, this is, as I said, the medium of rest. This is the one medium, this is the second medium. This medium here, because of the high energy on the sides, it's sort of like indicative that this medium was kind of, shall we say, nervous before the test, shall we say, before going into trance or doing this sort of work. This medium, on the other hand, if you look, the activity is kind of green, you've got blue at the front here. So this medium was kind of almost relaxed. There wasn't much going on in the brain of that medium at the time before they started. Now then, what was interesting was that what I did was I asked each of the mediums then to go into, do what they normally do. Just go into a trance stage and see what happens. And what I did was I captured the image of the brain at the moment they spoke, implying that that was the point where allegedly, shall we say, allegedly the spirit world was talking through them, so they were in the trance state. Okay? So you can see, if you remember what medium 1 was like to start with, very symmetrical there. In trance, as soon as they spoke, that was what happened. So here you can see, like we said before, that a lot of activity has migrated to the right side of the brain here. Not so much activity on the left, particularly on the left frontal part, where it deals with the speech centres and so forth. So there's not a lot of activity there, but the majority of the right side. Now what I found was quite interesting was when I looked at the second medium, It's pretty much identical. So this is a completely different medium. One was male, one was female. They both, different days of the week, different days I met them, and they both seemed to show, at the moment they spoke, the same type of level of activity that's on the left and the right sides, showing the right side of the brain here. And you seem to see that quite consistently across, using this equipment, shall I say, consistently with all the different trance mediums that I've done. So it seems to suggest that there is this activity on the right side that seems to be associated with the sort of mediumship, this trance mediumship in particular. So that's the type of work I get involved in. It's kind of, I find it interesting. It keeps me out of trouble and keeps me out of the house for a while. It keeps me out of trouble, and we go from there. Are there any questions before we carry on?
So,
You're going to have to shout real loud.
I know. So you did lots of trance mediums, but when you did mediums, you just did their audience. So was their brain activity the same? Or not? Was it slightly different? Like, what was the differences?
Yeah, I know what you're going.
Yeah.
Okay. What we have a tendency of seeing. Okay, so this will need to hide these slides until someone asks a question. Okay. So your question, what happens in a medium maybe demonstrated on platform, so to speak. Okay. Now notice trance mediums seem to have all that activity on the right side. Okay. So what we found in trance, in sort of normal mediumship, for a better word, okay, what we see is that when a medium starts what we call attuned to the spirit world, that term, blend with the spirit world, attune with the spirit world, what happens is you start to see this activity build up on the right side. Yeah? When they feel confident that they've got their connections, when they start presenting it, you start to see more activity on the right side. And then, when they start to wrap up, shall we say, wrap up the communication, you start to see that activity start to fade back again. But what's interesting is that it's not quite as strong as trance mediumship. So there seems to be some type of, you can argue, well, when someone does a demonstration of mediumship on platform, the difference between that and trance mediumship is only the amount of maybe focus or attention they give. Does that make sense? Because if you, as I said, when we saw trance mediumship, all of that side was red. But here, what you've got is a bit of red here and not so much. And I think that's probably due to the fact that when someone's working on a platform, they're consciously aware of the congregation. They have to present the information. You're always saying that, are you aware of this? Do you understand what I'm saying? So that medium can't quite get, if you like, engrossed, maybe, into that sort of mind state, that sort of area. Whereas a trance medium with their eyes closed and just talking, they don't really care what's out there, So does that answer your question?
It does, but also have you done one where you just had a private mediumship reading and seen the breakthroughs of that? Or did they come up the same?
I would expect, I'm not.
Because if they've got an audience, I'm just thinking it might be different, naturally seem to get to know it, etc. Whereas if you're just one-on-one, it might be different.
Absolutely. I would expect to find something similar, to be fair. There might be, this way, I would expect maybe to find perhaps a bit more red, maybe a bit more activity on the right side. Because like you said, they might be more relaxed. They may not be so conscious of the person sitting in front of them. That's what I think you might see. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of a follow on. Like, have you done measurements on those who are non-mediums but potentially go into just deep meditative states.
Yep, deep meditative states will be slightly different. What you have a tendency of seeing. I'll show you this one as well, because this is slightly different. It's sort of one, but a deep meditative state, you would expect to find blue activity, because they're in the relaxed side of activity there. If they're doing something like a mindfulness study, okay, you might find a bit of red at the frontal lobe, because what's happening there, they're having that sense of concentration. Do you know what I mean? Like you do in mindfulness. You know, so that frontal part of the brain may be active. Okay? But, yeah, so there is. I've seen these so many times now, I can tell you exactly what each one's doing. You know? And you'll see this later on as well, when we do the interactive stuff, that I can tell you exactly what not necessarily what you're thinking, but what's going on when, just by looking at the graph that you'll be seeing later. But just to give you an idea as well, where sometimes you see some rather interesting things that you would not expect. I managed to come across, several years ago, a trance, how do I do this? You know by a psychic artist or a spirit artist? Yeah. These are individuals who are able to go into like a trance state, very much like a trance medium, but they've got their eyes closed, and this particular trance medium close their eyes, and then pick up a pencil, and with their eyes closed, both hands draw a portrait of your loved one in spirit. Okay? Now, for that activity to occur, you would expect to find some activity in the frontal part of the brain, because obviously they're thinking about where the hands are, what they're drawing, and so forth. So, what we actually... Right. So this is the start. The medium was about to go into trance, so you can see again, it's on green, so it's mid-range, and it's kind of symmetrical as well. It tells you that the brain was just generally just relaxed, not doing much at all, just almost much as mental preparation. As soon as the medium picks up those pencils, indicating they've gone into trance. I don't know if you can read the numbers of the activity there. Now, I thought perhaps the equipment was 40, because I thought to myself, that's a bit peculiar here. I mean, I have to confess, I wasn't really paying much attention to the medium when they were doing this. I was looking at the reading, obviously this is like a capture of that. I looked at the reading and I freaked. So I thought, my God, I've killed them. Because it's indicating no brain activity at all. But yet, hands are moving quite fine over this piece of paper, this golden paper, drawing wonderful portraits of a loved one's spirit world. And that went on for about 5 minutes, this drawing. No activity at all coming from the equipment, until she put the pencils down. Then the activity stopped back. And it's one of those sort of moments where you think, I've got no explanation for that at all. But it just shows you that, how amazing, research can be, that it can come across all sorts of things. To this day, I have absolutely no idea why. I've got absolutely no reading there, and as soon as you put pencils down, readings come back. But it's just one of those anomalies that you sometimes come across. But on the flip side, the devout spiritualist would say, well, of course there's no activity there in the brain, because the medium has trained themselves to be completely passive to the influence of the spirit world. I have to confess and say, as a psychologist, I find that a little bit of a stretch, but nevertheless, that's what the evidence presented there. Any other questions at all? They're hard to come across, unfortunately. Trance psychic artists, it was just, I was fortunate to be in a conference and this the psychoanalyst was there, and so I just said, please come and sit for me and do and see what we can get. I was expecting to find some fun stuff. Interestingly, I actually came across an artist that does portraits, and I invited them up as well to see what activity was. And like I said, their activity, and this is without the chance, it's just a general, that's boring, doesn't it? A general artist, and like I said, what happened was we had activity in the frontal part of the brain. So it was red in the frontal part and sort of like green and everywhere else, primarily because they were using their frontal part to think about what they were drawing, But in this particular case, no activity at all. Any other questions at all?
Yeah,
Just take a real shout.
I was just going to say, I'm wondering, what part does maybe precognition play in this awareness?
Can you elaborate?
Well, there was an experiment done where people were shown pictures, and the most important thing they found was that before they saw the different types of pictures, the two different types, they were able to detect this and had a reaction for 1 or 2 seconds before that.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how this fits with consciousness. I'm not sure actually.
Yeah. I think that the work was with Dean Radin. I think the Noetic Institute in California. All these institutes in America are all in nice sunny places. It's quite ironic in California, Arizona. He did some research for those who are not familiar, and it has been replicated time and time again. And not just using EEG equipment, but also, and again, I wouldn't use this type of imagery for that type of thing. What we're going to be doing next is more likely the type of equipment I'll be using. I'll show you that in a minute. But this researchers in the Noetic Institute wired up the medium, or wired up these individuals, and it was actually in photos of that to invoke an emotional response. Okay, so it might have been a photo of a lion roaring, or a photo of a baby crying, or a cute kitten, or whatever, And what they did was they wired the individuals up, and to cut a long story short, as the gentleman said at the back there, what they found was the computer would pick these images at random, so it would be like an aggressive image, or a passive image, or like a cute image, and they would measure the response, the physiological response of the person. And what they found was that the person's physiological response was being measured and responding before the computer had picked the image. And it was like this sort of, this precognitive ability here. And that's been replicated time and time again. The gentleman from Italy that did this study with mediums and said, the information coming from the deceased. He also did a study, a driving part study, where people were sitting in a driving simulation, and they were having this computer screen and had to drive, and they had to measure the response of, when you do the driving test, or if you do the driving test now, you have to do the sort of this test first online, don't you? Where you do this awareness, perception awareness of the test, the person across the road, or this sort of thing. Well, what he did was he wired the individuals up while they were doing this, and found that the individuals unconsciously were responding. There were brain signals that were responding, and skin conductance measures that were responding before the person came out, this video, this person came out on the streets or what have you. So before the obstacles occurred, the people were responding to it. And that's what the driving simulation one that Patricio Salvi was doing in Italy. So the ability to have this sort of precognition ability has been replicated time and time again. So there is something there. They can't quite explain how that's happening. Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay. Now it's all over. to you guys. Because what we're going to do is we're going to measure your brain. God help us. So we're going to measure your brain here. We're going to use a piece of software like this. The idea is it's easy, and it's probably easier if I show you actually as we go through this, so bear with me. But before we do so, I can just show you how it works. It probably makes more sense. I had to go. When I first started doing this research, I spent a fortune on some EEG equipment that was just a single sensor. Okay, I used to call it my Wonder Woman band because it used to look like a Wonder Woman. So, I'm showing my age a little bit there. But it used a sort of like an archaic RF connection, like a shortwave RF connection. And I'll have it all set up, I'll have the medium sitting there and ready to go, and I'll have, the equipment all set up, and it'll all be perfect, the signal strength was perfect, and time again, it was a situation where I'll say to them, okay, now, just invite the spirit world to be with you. And as soon as they do that, the RF signal will just go completely flat, record nothing. And so I sort of like had to try a few pieces of equipment, and that couldn't be influenced, so we say, allegedly by the spirit influencer. But anyway, so we're going to use this headband here. This is called the Muse headband. You can get it from Amazon, most places. The amount of times I've plugged them, I'm sure I should get a commission. But it's called the Muse headband. There's a number of variations to it. As I said before, it's actually originally designed by the manufacturers for something called neurofeedback. Okay, neurofeedback is the ability for you, the equipment, to provide some sort of feedback so you learn to control your own mind. So it's like meditation practices and things like that. And in this particular model, now what happens is if you're using it for meditation, what happens is you connect to the app on your phone, and it will play maybe the sound of rain falling, rain outside. And as you're relaxing, you'll just hear the rain. But if your mind starts to wander, you'll start hearing thunder and things like that. And so the idea is that you then learn to bring your mind back, so you can just hear the rain. It's called neurofeedback. But anyway, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually look at this from this perspective. And what you've got here, I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, only to say to you that essentially what we're looking at here is certain patterns. This is actually measuring the frontal part of the brain here. Okay, so this is the cognition part, particular. And what happens is red indicates activity, more activity, green and yellow, indicate not so much activity, and eventually something's relaxed, you start seeing blue, okay, indicating less activity. And now you do have these sort of frequencies going along. You can see like 8 hertz and so forth. But we're not going to worry too much about that. I mean, if you've got some background in psychology or you have some idea, well, that's fine. But for the time being, what we're going to do is just look at this, and just so you can see, okay, how your brain actually flips from one thing to another, okay, and just to measure sort of activity going on. So, for example, if I was just to try and relax, can see that sort of moment there, a bit less activity going on, okay? And then as I start talking, obviously you get more activity coming up. So we're just going to have some fun with this, just so you can see that you do have a brain. Incidentally, I have used this, and unfortunately I didn't bring the other iPad with me, but you can use this and with, for example, spiritual healers. If you come across spiritual healers, for example, we've done research where you have two screens up, both the healer and the patient, if you like, wear this, and you'll find that they're both different patterns that we display, but as time develops, and as the healer starts to give the healing to the patient, you actually start seeing the brainwave activity start to synchronise together. To show some type of symbiotic sort of relationship going on between the patient, the spiritual healer, and the patient. And there's a few other bits of experiments we can do as well tonight. Okay, so this is, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my brain. Okay, I think it's time now that I offer myself to your service to see what brain you have. So what we're going to do there's no pressure to anyone here to sit up and be stared at amongst everyone here. But, you know, the idea is just similar. Is there anyone that would like to just volunteer themselves to see? Yeah, gentleman at the back, let's go. There's no ifs and buts here, just grab sit. Suggest Paul's brain was somewhat active at the start there. As you can tell, there was a lot of, there was all brain activity. So, Paul, do you do, everybody, here's Paul, here's everybody, okay. So Paul, do you do any meditations or anything like that? You do, brilliant stuff. So what I'd like you to do then, we're just going to, just see how we get on here. I'll make sure you give a fair chance there. Because there's a lot of activity there. There we go. That's what we're about. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, this is your brain axis at the moment. You'll spin around. There it is. Quite a lot. So let's see what we can do to reduce that. Okay. Okay. So in your own time, you can just do a meditation, just relax. So what we're going to do is just observe. Okay. We're just going to have to see what's going on here. So we have a lot of activity to start with. see gradually how the activity, the very high activity, is starting to, until he started listening to me then. That's that part of it. But if you look, you can actually start seeing blips of blue. This is the indication of the sort of relaxation, the meditation starting to develop. So what I've done there is just basically reduced it again a bit here, because we didn't actually go through a calibration cycle, just so you can see a bit more of what's going on. But you can see clearly that obviously when we're going down a little bit, you can see clearly more fluid activity there as Paul's relaxing. So just stay there for a moment, Paul. How are you with your multiplication? So. Okay. Probably not so. Okay. Could you go through just, you can see how, as Paul's listening, as the activity is starting to change a bit there, more activity. Okay, Paul, why don't you go through the 4 times table for us, please? Backwards and about. I'm only joking. Okay. So you see, that's the activity. So again, it just demonstrates, how it is possible with technology like this to measure the activity going on in the brain at the time. Now, of course, with more experience and more with a deeper sort of understanding of what's going on, you can actually clearly see what these sort of frequency bands are actually doing, and what they actually suggest. Okay? But as I said, for tonight's purpose, what we're trying to just see that you can actually just see the different patterns developing. Okay? So Paul, thank you for that. If you want to just quickly spin around and see that you've got a bit more activity there. You're seeing this blue activity coming across. There's actually quite a bit of activity coming from you, actually. So I have to try and calibrate it down a little bit. So, next, as I say, you're awesome. Okay, so we can see clearly that Paul had brain, which is always a good thing to see. Okay. Is there else like come up? Just to see what's going on, just a few more experiments. Yeah, come. So, everybody, Martin, everybody. Okay. So, I mean, this is your brain activity at the moment. It seems to suggest that you're thinking a little bit, probably wondering what's going on. is, do you do meditation? Do you do anything? Yeah, right, okay. Okay, let's see if we can calm the activity in your brain down then. The activity trying to raise it down for us. Okay? You can see instantly Martin goes into that stage of relaxation. Instantly starts to bloom. It's very different from where it started off. So it clearly shows that there is a physiological response. And remember, this is just by the process of thinking. We're only thinking to ourselves, we're just taking a deep breath and what have you. And it just does demonstrate that we do have control over our mental faculties. We are the masters. Not the brain doesn't have to control us. What we typically see with people that are stuff on meditators stages, you start to see blue activity at this upper end. What happens is the lower end down this side here normally stays active, because this is the low end of the frequency range that normally is more active when you're doing the meditations. But what we're trying to do, what you'll see, is this upper part, this upper band here, this area of the screen here, start to change. And this is where you start to see the blue activity, the green activity, and so forth, in that respect. Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, open your eyes for us, please. Thank you. There we go. Straight away. You can see that bang coming back again. Yeah. It clearly demonstrates that it's actually measuring the physiological responses of the brain then. Okay? Thank you very much. So your meditation actually does work. Okay, so that's good. That's good. So this program itself, okay, doesn't. What it does, it gives you an average of what's going on, okay, produces that. And as I said before, you have the frequencies up here, okay, and so I'm sure most or some of you will have heard of the devils of theta, alpha, beta, gamma, these sort of brainwave activities here, and they are marked by these frequencies up here. But for the purpose of, as I said tonight, what we're trying to show is that the differences between the patterns between one state and another. Okay, that's what we're trying to do here. Out of interest, is there any mediums here? Reluctant hands going. Reluctant hands going. Okay. Is there would there be a medium that just would happen to like to come up as well? There we go. I knew if I send the thoughts out. We'll just see what happens. First of all, we need the vibration. Yeah? So, everybody? Angel, everybody. Angel says that she's going to demonstrate mediumship and levitate across the sea and back to the Is that okay? That's fine. Very good. Okay. Now, in all seriousness, what we're going to do is, I'm not going to ask you to do too much, okay? Don't worry about that. And an important point here as well, for anyone who is a medium, who may get invited to be part of research in particular, is that no research can say you are or are not a medium. Okay? All research can ever do is tell you the results of their experiment. You know, and sometimes the experiments are good, sometimes they're not. I remember, I'm just a second, okay? I remember taking part in research because one of the things I forgot to mention was for the last 20 years I've also been a medium myself, serving churches and centres and all that sort of stuff. So maybe I've got a slight sort of a particular interest in this in terms of the scientific research perspective. But you know, I took part in some research at the Science of Psychical Research several years ago. But halfway through the experiment, they changed the protocol halfway through. And when I sort of like complained, I said, actually, you can't do that, you know, you can't change the protocol halfway through. They said, well, you know, that's the way it goes. And what actually happened was that I was given the idea was I was given these photos from deceased, apparently from who are deceased people, and all I had to do was to provide evidence about these individuals in these photos, and that was it. Now, the protocol was that each individual would be unrelated to the other, so they would come from different people, different families. And on this particular day, I was given these photos, one after the other, and I did a sitting for each one. And as I'm doing them, I'm thinking to myself, something's not quite being quite right here. And as mediums, as mediums, we have a tendency we have a feeling, we have this sort of this gut feeling inside us, and it's like something's not quite feeling right here. I actually asked the individual, the researcher, are these photos separate? Are they unrelated photos? And the researcher said, well, these are the photos that were given to me, so as far as I'm aware, they're unrelated. And so, you know, I'm giving this information, but at the back of my mind, I'm fighting this sort of other, this other content, if you like, saying, no, there's something not right here, something not right here. And as it works out, I went back a week later to get the marks, if you like. And the researcher came up to me and apologised and said, look, you know, we've marked it, we've like scored them, as we said, but actually you were right. You know, every single one of them were related. What happened was the person that was supposed to get the photos ran out of time. So they just went through their family album and picked up 5 people out of their album. And there I am, a week before, scratching my head thinking, I'm sure they're related, but you know. But anyway, so Angel. Okay, so what we have here, okay, we look, so we can see some little activity here. Okay, we have this line coming down here. Okay. And now, as I set that, it all go down. Here we go. Back again. See? Okay. So Angel, you can open your eyes for us for a moment. Thank you. So we have a baseline. Thank you. So we have a baseline here. Okay, so just relax for us. Okay. You were just going off. was happening then, just so everyone's... Yeah, because it's... Just so, you want to say that out loud?
I was in trance.
So what happened there was we had a situation where Angel was moved into an altered state and allowed the, awareness of the spirit world to draw close. And the way you can see that sometimes is that you see a sort of standard pattern. So you see sort of like solid lines developing that you don't see now. Remember I was pointing out this study to you see these standard lines. Now interestingly, for things such as trance, a lot of trance mediums, when you go into trance, they say you go into this very deep relaxation, this deep passive state. Actually, that's how they are feeling. Their brain activity is the complete opposite. Their brain activity is normally quite high, so to speak, and quite almost buzzing, in that respect. So what I'd like you to do for, if you don't mind, Angels, you see your brain activity at the moment. There's no real pattern there as such, but you just do maybe just a relaxation, or that's all the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, can you come back? You have no brain activity at the moment. So, again, it's just one of those strange experiences you have to just take on board. What's all that all about? Because you can see, as soon as I said them, you open your eyes, the activity started to come back, so therefore, it it's not likely to be it. Okay. Right. Let's always assume the equipment first, then obviously. Okay, so it seems to suggest that blue activity was equipment failure, which is always good. Good just to roll that out. Okay, good. Okay, so we saw the normal activity in Angel. We've now seen the activity as you relaxing. You see a slightly different activity. You saw activity at the start that seemed to show, it's not really clear, that we had these sort of definitive patterns coming down at the bar coming down around 32 hertz. Would you mind just asking the spirit world to draw close? You don't have to give any evidence or anything, but just see. Okay? We'll just see if we can see any particular patterns coming up. Again, we sometimes, when we move into that altered state, mediums move into that altered state associated with trance or some sort of mediumship, we have sometimes seem to see certain sort of bars or patterns developing as they work. Not always the case, but we do sometimes, or you'll see blocks of patterns where it's very similar to what we're seeing here. You're seeing sort of little activity here, and you're seeing sort of these blocks of activity developing. And it's kind of interesting, it seems to show that there's very little activity in this frequency range. We've got some activity here and some activity there. Yeah. So, again, I was saying about trance mediums, that activity of their brain seems to be quite active. This is exactly what we're seeing here with Angel at this moment in time. You've got this low activity here, you've got the blue and so forth, so there's low activity here, and then you've got this, at the upper end, you've got these, and you see how the pattern has changed, how the pattern has become consistent. Okay. Can you go back into relaxation for us? You see the switch developing there. You can see now how it's becoming more sort of uniform across the whole thing. Have you still got them there with you? Have you still got them there with you?
No.
Okay, so how are you with your multiplication?
Oh,
Sorry?
really?
Really bad?
Yeah.
Okay. We did 1 times table? Is that okay? Very good. Alright. Okay. So back to your normal activity again here. Okay. So you can see again how this can be used to see patterns of change, if you like, within different states of consciousness, different states of awareness. Mediums with the trance, we saw a definitive, quite clear line with the just being aware of the spirit world. We saw this block of activity change that was different to when Angel went into meditation, and different to a normal waking state here. Okay? So yes, so not only we found a brain, we actually found that there is commonality. And what I should say as well is this is a sort of common sort of commonality you see with mediums as well. Okay, you see these sort of clear blocks of activity at certain frequencies that seem to predominate or be associated with mediumistic activity. Okay, so thank you very much. And so, so tonight, what I've tried to show is that, first of all, if you are a medium, hopefully now you've got some evidence base in terms of the scientific literature to know that what you're experiencing is actually genuine. That more likely than not, when you're working with the spirit world, there is a scientific evidence base for it. And also the same is true, if you've gone to a city for a medium or what have you, you know now that mediumship isn't just something that's a fictitious thing that goes on in a person's mind. And it's more that can be explained by cold reading techniques or hot reading techniques. And the fact that we can actually now measure it with equipment that you can get from Amazon, for goodness sakes. It demonstrates the fact that we're actually now, I believe, coming to a point where not only will the scientific community have to start to accept this as we go forward, but hopefully we'll be able to advise others and use this technology, maybe use these ideas to perhaps help mediums develop their mediumship the same way. I know that when I started developing this idea with trance mediums, not only were I able to see commonality within the brain space of trance mediums, but I also found my recruitment of trance mediums become more and more difficult as I started realising that I could actually differentiate between when someone was in a trance state or when they weren't in a trance state. And you make your own minds up of that, of what you will. But it can also be used to help others to understand how to move into the trance state, how to work with the spirit world, how to move forward with their development in some ways. So a lot of the work that I do isn't just about demonstrating the scientific evidence base for it, but it's also to be able to help those who are interested in mediumship to be able to develop their ability, their gift, whatever you wish to call it, in a way that matches what the scientific literature says. Okay. Are there any other questions? That's all. It's 1:45 now.
Another general one for this particular presentation, because I'm very familiar with the kind of psychological experiments that you've been doing. But more recently, I suppose, in my career, I've been very interested in the unconscious mind, the human mind, what we think of. From a young perspective. And I'm very aware of the difference between the kind of collective unconscious and the more individual one that you hypothesised anyway. Well, I suppose my question is, how far are mediumship and telepathy and various other things, the human unconscious mind, which is incredibly powerful, and that doesn't necessarily rule out to a spiritual dimension. How would one possibly shade into the other? I don't suppose there'd be any clear line between the spiritual and the more human. Probably more continuing, if such a thing exists. I mean, do you have any thoughts about this?
When you look at the literature as a whole, look at the different phenomena as a whole, there seems to be a commonality. And that commonality, you mentioned the unconscious and so forth, but there's something that we often talk about in mediumship development classes and psychic development and these sort of stuff classes. And we very often use the term awareness. But we don't actually, I've never come across any group where they actually really just notice what they mean when you say awareness. Now, the literature and the research I've done seems to suggest that, if I get what you're saying, is that actually the thing that underpins everything that we experience is awareness, is our ability to turn our attention to whatever source we want to be aware of. And that comes from unconscious. It comes also from that ability of the conscious mind, of that will to be able to turn our mind to something. So, for example, when you're working, have you heard of psychometry? Yes? Who haven't heard about psychometry? Psychometry is the idea that you can pick up impressions from an object, and so you can tell about the history of the object and who maybe sat there or whatever, or where the object was. Now, the question that I often ask is, am I really picking the information up from the object, or am I turning my intention, my awareness, to where that information is? Mediumship, okay? In mediumship, you have the idea that the spirit world are in some sort of physical form in some way, when our minds are in the physical form, and they sort of blend with us. Yeah? But do they? Or is it we turn our mind and our attention to where the spirit world are and get that information? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we talk about precognition, being able to see the future, is it we really see the future then, or is it we're just turning our attention to where we want it to be? And so, if you look at a lot of this phenomena relies on our conscious awareness and our ability to turn our attention to it. The work that I do with mediums seems to suggest that one of the key abilities of a medium or a psychic or anything is that ability to be able, and hopefully all mediums will agree with this, is the fact the ability to be able to hold that spirit person. Yeah? So while they're demonstrating, talking to you, for example, let's say hypothetically your grandmother, for example, yeah? As I'm talking to you, I'm also aware of your grandmother. You see what I mean? And, but I have to turn my attention to it. Do you know what I mean? And so all this sort of phenomenon all seems to rely on our ability to turn our attention to the source, in fact. And you know, and if you want to go to a theological or philosophical perspective, one might argue that from a godlike perspective, if you want to go there, if we are truly the spark of God or the spark of divinity, so to speak, we should be able to turn our attention to whatever source we want. It's only our conditioning that prevents us from doing so, And I think from Jungian perspective, the archetypes and so forth, that's the characters that we use. That's why I feel that is emanated in that sort of perspective. The ability to turn your attention and what you're aware of in that way. So it's the work out there coming out is kind of quite broad because it is looking at consciousness, it's looking at attention, looking at selective attention, and the ability to turn your awareness to whatever source you want to turn your source to, your attention to.
Chris, when I saw you a few years ago at the Linwood Fellowship, you did an experiment a little bit like what you did tonight, where you had somebody, I think they were blindfolded, they couldn't see the audience, and you got the audience to then, at intervals, send them like mind energy, and it reacted on the screen. And I was completely blown away by that, because the person did not know. Would you like to say something about that?
Yeah. So, generally speaking, what happens there, that is, comes from the work of Rupert Sheldrake and the like about being aware, being unconsciously aware, because a lot of the stuff we're measuring here is the unconscious awareness of things. Our unconscious awareness of being stared at. And it works best, I can do it tonight, because it works best with a smaller group with sort of like the focus of it. But generally speaking, what happens is, if I turn the chair round, like this, and have someone sitting in front, okay, with the headband on, you would see the activity very much as you saw it tonight, okay? And what I generally would do is, in a smaller group, I will say to the I'll indicate silently to the people watching to send a thought, to send like healing or send power or whatever to the person sitting in front. Now this person is either blindfolded or headphones on, they don't know what's happening. And what you would see is the activity on the brain on the screen change. And then you'll ask them to stop sending the thoughts or the healing or what have you, and then you'll see the pattern change again. So what's happening here is, I then go and speak to the person and say, what are you aware of? And they'll say they're not aware of anything at all. So what this demonstrates is the fact that on a very unconscious level, we are all connected in some way, that we're able to influence the activity, the mental, the brain activity, the EEG activity of a recipient. Now, the reason you're in a smaller group is because it's you only need one or two people, because we don't know how it works, to be honest, okay? We don't know how it works and why it works. But you only need one or two people to be clever digs and say, I'm not going to send the power, I'm going to do something else. Yeah, and you'll find the experiment doesn't work so well. So we look for a small group of people who are willing to go with it every time. And this is what you see time and time again. And Rupert Sheldrake writes about this in the staring experiments. And I've got a friend, interesting. They're actually doing research for the intelligence service. So I've got a friend who was a police officer for many years, and he's often said that whenever he had to tell somebody, maybe somebody that they're thinking of committing an offence or something, they were trained or told, never stare at the person with the back of the head, never look at the person directly, even if the person is walking down the road completely not aware of what's going on, and may have police officers behind watching. And because he says that for some reason, if we were to stare at the person and acknowledge the person, very often they wouldn't commit the offence. They would do something else. It's almost like that there was some sort of unconscious sort of reaction there going on. And so according to what my friend was saying, as a police officer, he was taught that you use your peripheral vision, so to speak, to look at these people. You don't stare at them and so on, because you staring at them can change their behaviour. Well, I thought it was a police officer, that's exactly what you want to do, but it just appears you want to arrest them instead. But nevertheless, so yes, it is possible using this technology to actually see this sort of unconscious activity as well. Yeah, it is fascinating. It really is down to the limit of your imagination as to what you can do with this kind of stuff. Are there any other questions at all?
Is it possible to, there's a lot of talk about good vibrations now, isn't there, and negative, and would that show up if everybody...
Only if it had a response to the physiological response of the individual. Yes. So, I'm saying to healing, you see this sort of activity sort of between the patient and the healer change. So that could be like the positive energy or the positive vibrations going on here. But yeah, so, and as I was saying about this experiment where a person blindfolded and not knowing that the group was sending positive energy or what have you. I mean, ethically, we don't send negative energy, or bad thoughts or anything from an ethical perspective. But you do see changes. So if it affects, and many of the things we're seeming to see, or things I've witnessed using this, seems to suggest that we are very susceptible to each other's thoughts. And it does have a physiological response on individuals. Absolutely. Anyone else? Any other questions? In that case, what I'd like to say is just once again, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for participating. And if there's any further questions, then I'm sure Andy would love to give my email out to Emma, and we'll go from there. But thank you very much for your time.
That was amazing. So thank you ever so much for that. And I don't know about you, but why isn't everybody doing this? I think this is a real avenue that should be pursued more. And well done, and keep going. Really amazing. One more hand, please, for Christine.
The information where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.